Gee, what's today's date? 15th.
Yeah.
Okay, we're October 15, 1999. This is Scott Billington. Now, I guess if you're not the first Rounder employee, you are the first who's made a life out of it and are still here. Is that
Yeah, I guess
correct?
so.
Or are you the first?
No, I came to work at Rounder in 1976.
Okay.
As Rounder's first real salesperson. Oh, I can't say that. I had been managing a retail store in Boston, and Ken Irwin was my salesman when Rounder started. So I actually bought the first two Rounder releases from Ken Irwin when he came to the store to sell them to me.
He wasn't your salesman as an employee of the store.
No, he was Rounder's salesperson who came around to stores to try to convince them to stock the records.
Right.
And I'd also known the three Rounders through an organization called the Boston Blues Society, which was me and 6 or 7 other friends, who included Peter Goralnik and Dick Waterman, Erica Brady, Steve Frappier, Dirk Gessner. We put on blues concerts. A lot of these guys were a little older than I was, but my store in Boston had become somewhat of a magnet for blues fans. We had a real complete stock of blues records. And I got to know Peter, and we put on concerts, mostly solo acoustic blues people. Mance Lipscomb, Joseph Spence, Hacksaw Harney, Roosevelt Sykes, Little Brother Montgomery, Son House, Dr. Ross.
This late 60s?
Early 70s.
Early 70s.
And toward the end of the Boston Blues Society, we booked some bands too, Hound Dog Taylor, Otis Rush, people like that. And the three Rounders would come to the Boston Blues Society shows and sell records from a tabletop.
Okay.
And that was where I first met them. In 1976, I was playing in a band that was becoming quite successful in New England called Roseland. It was a swing band. We played every other weekend at the Inn Square Men's Bar. I wish we'd had a swing band today in 1999. We probably would have made a little more money. But I couldn't hold down a full-time job in a record store, managing the record store and playing this band at the same time. And at that time, my ambition was still to be a musician. And so I quit the record store, but I needed more money than I was making as a musician. I have a daughter, and was very young at the time. And a guy who worked for ABC Records named Greg Kimmelman put together a little package deal for Rounder where he would be their promotion person and I would be their salesperson, sort of to bring Rounder into a more mainstream marketing context for sales. Things didn't work out with Greg at all, but I stayed on and became Rounder's first salesperson, who I guess had experience in the mainstream world of selling records. The store was New England Music City. It was the largest store in Boston.
What was it called?
At the time? New England Music City. It was the largest record shop in Boston at the time, across from the Prudential Center. But my interest really was in Rounder kinds of music and jazz. So we had a really great jazz department, and blues and folk. Couldn't sell as much folk music there as you could in Cambridge, but I'd had experience with the major label salespeople coming in every week.
Right.
It was a very service-oriented business back then, where the salespeople would visit you and take inventories, and it was kind of an interesting time too in the early 70s. That was when the record business itself turned into a real business with regard to rock, anyway.
Right, it became a real industry then, right?
Yeah. So usually on weekends, the band would go out and play. New York State, Maine, Hartford, Connecticut, wherever. And Mondays and Tuesdays I'd be back in Boston and Cambridge to go to the stores and take inventories and sell Rounder records. And within a couple of years, I guess I was offered the job of being Rounder's general manager. I guess I've always had a real push and pull between my interests as a musician or a creative person and business. And I decided I didn't want to be general manager of Rounder Records. And so I actually participated in interviewing Duncan Brown, who was Rounder's general manager for many, many years after that. But I ended up working for the company in a great many capacities over the years. I did local promotion for Rounder and Rounder distribution, taking the records around to radio stations in the New England area. All this activity, the sales and promotion and so forth, was confined to New England.
Can I
Yeah.
interrupt right there? What was your role in the identity of Rounder as a collective? I've heard a lot of things where they wanted people to be parts of the collective, and I guess, was that kind of ending by '76?
It was ending then, yeah. It was definitely ending. I was hired as an employee.
Okay.
So that was a...
And that wasn't even an issue in your joining? You didn't have to go live with them and share your beer and stuff like that?
No.
Okay.
No. There were quite a few people from the collective left then, but I mean it was also a kind of schizophrenia that persisted for many years, because there was still, I think, the attitude in many ways, which I like myself, that if you saw something that needed doing, go ahead and do it.
Right.
There was the problem often of getting paid for it once you've done it.
Okay.
But I guess I think I'm a person that's a pretty good self-starter with different things, and that environment, I think, worked to my advantage. And I think there was a little bit of, not a little bit, there was a lot of struggle in making that transition from this utopian company that was there to serve the music to a business. And I mean, to this day, I would say that Kenner and Marion Layton and Bill Nowlin don't have particularly good management skills of people. And I think it's been a struggle for them over the years to have to deal with that aspect of running a business, and yet it's...
How did that manifest itself early on in any particular way, if you remember or can say?
Well, I think there was probably the attitude that this was being done for an altruistic vision, and which it was. But there would always have to be that balance of maybe giving an employee a little positive feedback and a little, and finding some way to make it all make financial sense for the people that worked for them.
Right.
And the ultimate manifestation of that was the union.
Yeah. How did that get started?
It was employees feeling that the company was making enough money that they wanted a better compensation package and things more clearly defined, whether it was health insurance or vacation time or so forth.
Did employees contact union reps?
Yeah, no, but I was not a part of this, and I made my personal decision was not to participate in the process. To hold myself, I guess, as kind of a third entity.
Yeah.
In that, so when the elections came for the union, I just abstained. I didn't vote.
Yeah, in fact, you told me that.
Yeah. And I figured I'd rather just continue to do my best at negotiating with the three owners on my own.
which I guess wasn't an option presented to you once the union was voted in. Is that right? I mean, did they?
Well, I've never been part of the union.
Oh, I see.
I've never been a union member.
Oh, it's
no.
not a little shop in Massachusetts, or I mean, in a lot of states you have
Well,
to.
I think when they started the union, there was an option to join and an option not.
Okay,
After that, anybody that was employed by the company had to join the union unless they were management.
I understand. Okay.
So somehow I managed to stay out of it.
I see. Okay. But they resisted, I take it. Resisted,
Oh,
or were just puzzled?
absolutely resisted. Yeah, yeah.
Why? What was their? I mean, that doesn't fit with the altruistic political vision of.
No, it's been something I've never been able to figure out over the years. That on one hand, there's the support for the downtrodden worker. You know, early on, albums that showed the plight of the coal miners, or today, even we put out some albums recently of union songs from the 30s and so forth. But when it came to dealing with the contemporary world, Rounder is still not union signatory with the musicians union. Although, for my own projects, I feel the union scale is a pretty good system.
Yeah.
You know, it leaves people feeling that they've been compensated fairly. So I really try to always pay my musicians union scale,
Right.
even though we're not in the union. So I don't know. It's sometimes I feel if the Rounders had had better people skills,
Mm-hmm.
that the union would not have happened.
Common story. How overt was the sense that this was a political mission? You know, up till the time of the union struggles, that the whole project of Rounder was a political project. We're putting out the music of the dispossessed or non-mainstream music, however people might phrase it.
I wouldn't say political as much as maybe the music of the disenfranchised, or authentic music coming from people.
Mm-hmm. Was that cast as a political act, though?
To a degree. I saw it more as anti-commercial, I guess might be the word.
Okay.
So that there was an acknowledgement of music that evolved in a continuous line, folk music, and it would manifest itself in commercial ways every now and then, but I don't think I've ever been a musical purist myself. And to a degree, I would say that this has not been a company of purist tastes.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the very early days, there was some acknowledgement of very exciting things being done with traditional music. If you look at the Holy Modal Rounders, or some of those things. But there was a feeling that this was being done for a reason other than making money. That for art, for the political content, for offering music that was true and authentic, not manipulated for the marketplace.
And that could have been done with any music. I mean, you could have taken a psychedelic rock band and not manipulated it through the marketplace, except at a certain point in time the marketplace responded to that, I guess.
Yeah, although if you look at Folkways as an early model for Rounder, I think that's somewhat accurate, and the people that I knew, the three owners knew Chris Strachwitz from our Hulu Records, or Moses Ash. There were people who had done this before, and I mean that's I think still the reason that I'm here today, absolutely. And
Music that's done for non-commercial purposes?
No, not for non-commercial purposes really, but that basically there's a corner of this company that consists of music that I like.
Right. Which I do want to talk about, by the way. But that's
And I tend to prefer either the really traditional music or someone who has taken that traditional form and messed with it good.
Uh-huh.
I think the problem I have, and this is something that I face with A&R every day now, is that you've got all of these, in the blues field, for instance, thousands of bands all playing the same old shit. And maybe it's authentic, maybe they've mastered a tradition, but it's boring.
Yeah.
And, that's what I hope Rounder doesn't represent. Anyway,
well, and it's, I want to move interviews. I hope we have the time, but if not, I will, seek it out at another time. But,
yeah.
How was stuff selling in the late 70s? How was Rounder product selling? How hard was it to get yourself into stores in the New England area?
Well, there were certainly less of Rounder's kind of record back then. In fact, in some ways, Rounder had the field to itself.
That was a blessing in a sense.
Yes.
Given that
so
if you were going to do that stuff, that was good.
Yeah. So an artist like a Norman Blake, let's see who else. Or Clarence White, Kentucky Colonels. I mean, these are actually newsworthy releases when they came out. It wasn't music that had been oversaturated in the marketplace. And when we had a good record, it would sell. It didn't take too long. Most of the places where I sold records would just let me maintain that section of the store for them. Although I found if there wasn't somebody at the store that knew something about the music, it was harder for the store to sell it.
Right.
But Norman Blake's solo guitar record, there were probably 30 titles on Rounder that I could put, or in the labels that Rounder distributed at the time too, that I could put in most any store and know they were going to sell.
Just again, for clarity, this was you worked a bunch of New England states?
Yeah,
at the time?
basically I'd sell records wherever the band played.
Oh, okay.
And then stay in touch with them by phone, and then the next time the band would go up there, I'd make another personal contact.
Okay.
It's kind of an odd job in the beginning. But it was a good way to get a feel for the record business beyond where I had worked before in Boston. I also early on had edited this newspaper that I just assumed not remind anybody of. It was called Pop Top.
Uh-huh.
I would write an editorial every month, and I actually got the Rounders to write a column on bluegrass for that magazine. So we actually had a connection there too before I came to work.
That was a
here.
local fanzine.
Yeah. There's the publisher is still around, I believe, a guy named Barry Glovsky, and there's reviews and articles on musicians. Just
Did they do their column for a while?
Yeah.
Gotta get that.
I think I may have some copies of it somewhere.
That's right.
But eventually, we hired other salespeople. Duncan Brown became the general manager, and there were funny things that kept me afloat as a salesperson back then. I remember this group called the Mom and Dads, which was 4 senior citizens on the GMT Crescendo label who played music that old folks liked.
Uh-huh.
Like accordion and clarinet, tunes from the 30s and 40s. And the Mom and Dads sold like crazy in Maine. So I'd go to Maine and I would get an order for like 2,000 Mom and Dads records. So there were some funny things like that kind of sustained Rounder's distribution activity back then.
And I take it all the money went into a big pot.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The distribution company was seen as a way to raise money for the label.
Right.
And when the label began, in later years, when the label was supporting the distribution company, that's when we stopped having a distribution company. But eventually, I started doing some things. I would write all of the copy for the new release sheets, which is actually something that I've just started doing again over the past few months here, is writing the blurbs for the new release sheets, which maybe is a peculiar skill, and it frustrates me that nobody in marketing or promotion or publicity can do this. But it kind of comes from a balance of knowing about the music and being able to write about it in a positive way without being too hypey. So I'd actually type the new release sheets and write the copy as I typed for the distribution company. And I started doing some artwork for the company then too. Some basic graphic design. As the years went on, by the late 70s, in 1978, 79, I started making some small efforts at record production. There were some wonderful tapes from the Boston Blues Society of Johnny Shines. And Peter Guralnick and I put together a proposal for Rounder that we release these tapes as an album. That was the actual first album that I made or participated in. Peter wrote the notes, I designed the cover, and Dirk Gessner from the Boston Blues Society, who recorded the tapes. We made an arrangement with him and with Johnny Shines and released that record. Bill Nolan and I went to the Bahamas to record Joseph Spence. So initially my contacts were kind of coming out of that Boston Blues Society years.
And had Spence played for the Society?
Yes. Yeah, he was,
days on the
yeah. He was somebody that influenced Ry Cooder. So I started doing some graphic design. This is kind of a crazy job because things would come up and I would just start doing them. And I hadn't had any formal training there. I'd had pretty much a leaning toward doing artwork when I was a kid. When I was in bands, I was always the guy that made the posters.
Right.
And then the George Thorogood record sold.
Yeah.
And that really changed the company forever. And that's what gave me the opportunity to really go out and start producing records for Rounder.
Okay. Just the infusion of money.
Yeah,
Really
yeah. So, and that had been a dream of mine since I was probably 15 or 16 years old. I would imagine collections of old blues singles I could put out, or what it would be like to go into the studio with somebody. It was something that I had wanted to do, and well, if I'd gone to work for Arista Records as a salesman, that would have put me out of that, and it was a wonderful opportunity. So with George Thorogood's success, every other band that played blues wanted to be on Rounder all of a sudden. And we signed Clarence Gatemouth Brown. His manager, Jim Bateman, who's a good friend of mine today, came to Boston, and at the time we had a relatively large budget for Rounder. It was a $20,000 budget. I went to Bogalusa, Louisiana, and Gate had been messing around with country music. He'd been on Hee Haw. He made an album with Roy Clark, and my idea was to do a real tough, big band R&B record, which he had done to a degree in the 50s too. It was a chaotic session. We were writing the horn arrangements as we went. So, rhythm section rehearsing in one place, somebody's writing charts for 5 horns in another place, and I think we got it all on tape in 4 days. And the album went on to win a Grammy, which was kind of astonishing for me. But that right there at that moment with Gatemouth Brown, I met David Farrell, who's the engineer that I've worked with over the years. We've probably made 100 albums together now.
Where'd you get the tunes
Louisiana.
for the record?
Pardon?
Where'd you get the tunes for the record?
I brought some of them in. Gate had some. He had a pretty good repertoire of unrecorded songs at the time, and he wrote a few new ones. I brought in a Percy Mayfield song, a Junior Parker song. That was before the days when I tried to cultivate relationships with songwriters per se, but when I was a teenager, I amassed a pretty good collection of blues and R&B 45s, and for a while they served me as a pretty good library.
Was that record unlike anything Rounder had done before?
Yeah.
It sounds...
Yeah. And
were they aware of what you were doing, or did they just hear it for the first time later? Or you must have told them just to get the budget. You must have told them what you were.
Yeah. I mean,
pulling in.
And I think they liked it. I did have, with Marion in particular, there was always this little question of whether I was getting too slick for Rounder.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've had that leveled at me over the years a few times. I guess the idea of having anybody produce a record for Rounder was an alien concept at first. Because if you're really trying to just document musicians doing what they do, your idea is to be as invisible as possible. Although, even if you go back and look at the Alan Lomax recordings that Rounder has been issuing, I think the minute you stick a microphone in front of somebody and take them out of the context in which music would be played, you've already altered it.
And he was more intrusive than that.
Oh yeah, he certainly was. So, the idea that we would participate in choosing the repertoire, participate in putting together the band for an artist, and to create an environment specifically to make a record, it was a different concept for Rounder. Also on that session I met Red Tyler, Alvin Tyler. We needed a tenor saxophonist, so called New Orleans and got Red Tyler to come in to play. And that really did get me started.
Had you spent time in Louisiana before?
Just a little bit. I went down there to hang out with some friends who had a band down there. They had lived in New England, and I played with them here. And I went down there to visit them for Jazz Festival in 1979. And I was so impressed with the music that I heard there, and surprised that no one was recording it. Because the commercial scene in New Orleans by the late 70s had died down. Alan Toussaint's days as a hit maker were over.
Was Malaco doing something with some of the people that had been in the New Orleans scene at all?
Earlier in the 70s, King Floyd had a big hit that grooved me. There were some things like that, but I mean, it's funny in some ways how the commercial music of one era becomes the traditional music of another 20 or 30 years later, and that's what happened in New Orleans, I think, where the classic R&B sounds, which were overtly commercial in their day, even though they were tapping something that was coming from the people, became roots music later on, but I think the thing that again, and finding a Johnny Adams or an Irma Thomas. Here were simply great and timeless singers. And or James Booker, who was just an eccentric, iconoclastic genius. Somebody who made his own thing out of the tradition, and I think that this is something that has been an issue in bluegrass and in blues and New Orleans rhythm and blues when you've had an era, the stack sound in the 70s coming out of Memphis, or the New Orleans R&B sound, the Dave Bartholomew records from the 50s, the Fats Domino and the Smiley Lewis and so forth, or the Alan Toussaint sound from the 60s, the Ernie Cato, Irma Thomas. And you have an artist who moves you in some way. Making a record with him is a challenge because I don't feel like there's anything particularly valid about going back and trying to replicate that old commercial sound with them. And yet you want to honor where they've come from as well. With an artist like Irma, when she was making records in the 60s, it wasn't music that she had dreamed up herself and put together a band and gone out to play. It was Alan Toussaint's idea of what Irma should sound like.
What was the state of her career? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Which doesn't diminish her as an artist at all, because she's one of the greatest and most charismatic and inspiring singers that I've ever come across. So the state of her career, when I met her in the early 80s, she'd moved back to New Orleans. She'd been living in Los Angeles for a while, at which point her career came to a halt. She was working as a sales clerk in Montgomery Ward in California. Came back to New Orleans, married Emil Jackson, her husband, and her husband today, and gradually started trying to get back out as an artist again, working clubs in the New Orleans area and the Gulf Coast area.
And you said that scene itself was pretty depressed.
Yeah. And with Johnny Adams in particular, Johnny had made... Irma always had appeal with fraternity audiences, with white audiences. Someone like Johnny Adams existed completely within the African-American world in the South. And he toured these little black clubs all around the South. I can remember going with him to this town called Diamond, Louisiana. I've never been able to find it on the map since. But a big old wooden roadhouse with, 400 or 500 people that came out to see Johnny that day in this little black town. But I'm getting a little sad. But the idea of producing records with these people for me was always to find great songs,
yeah,
and put together recording situations that would bring out something special about that person. With Irma, I think she and I have fumbled a couple of times in trying to find that place. My relationship with Johnny, we made 9 records together. I'm probably more proud of than any other thing I've done for Rounder or with music, and that I think that I was able to create a different setting each time that sometimes brought out an aspect of Johnny that nobody had heard before. Johnny is a jazz singer, for instance. So I really have come to see that this is roots music. It's music coming out of a deep tradition. When I'm speaking of the rhythm and blues, out of the African American church, out of the drumming traditions in New Orleans, and we tap all of these things in these records. But it's also music that's being created as a record. We're not documenting anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was, you talked about the feedback you got, you said particularly from Marion, but in general, there's some kind of sense maybe it's too slick for Rounder.
Yeah.
You did the Gate record. How did it do initially, in its first run?
Did pretty well. Ended up paying royalties.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, did that fact alone change any tunes about your direction, or
Well,
what you
it
might do
didn't
next?
sell like George Thorogood, that's for
Well,
sure. You know,
Yeah, but
15,000, something like
I
that.
trust they weren't that spoiled that they immediately
It
went to
definitely
another
showed us
door.
that it definitely showed us that we could be more ambitious in this field.
And did it silence the too slick for rounder type sense, or did that continue?
Oh, it continued a little bit
Okay.
with Johnny Adams, with Solomon Burke.
I wanna. You'll probably remember. What's the name of the first Johnny Adams record? From the Heart.
From the Heart,
From the
yeah.
Heart. Now the picture on the cover of that album, which I think is a wonderful, wonderful picture, looks to me, if you want to think of something that may be the antithesis of everything Rounder had been before,
yeah.
I think that picture with the pink shirt.
Oh,
and
yeah,
You can
yeah.
you can see the fabric in that suit.
Yep.
I think on that picture.
Oh, yeah,
Did you get
yeah.
any feedback on that? Did you care? Did anybody care?
Well, you know, when I came to Rounder with the idea of recording music in New Orleans, the first feedback I got was, gee, maybe you could do something like Vanguard's Chicago the Blues Today, or Alligator had done a series like that too, like a series of 3 albums of sort of sampled things.
Right.
And I guess my dream at the time was not to make academic records. I wanted something that that spoke to someone in a more contemporary way. And yeah, I mean, I guess I think the Johnny Adams record looks like a Southern Soul record. Yeah. And Rounder has occasionally been successful at reaching the African American Southern market, but not consistently. And we never really did with Johnny, but we had some real successes with Johnny too over the years.
Now, he's just said something that I think is kind of interesting in that Adams' career, when you found him, was on, is it what was called the Chitlin Circuit? It was on the Black
you
Southern
could say
Circuit?
the Chitlin Circuit, yeah.
I guess it's a disfavored term nowadays, but it's, but that's kind of what it was. And
Yeah.
yet you didn't sell those records. You made these great records, high production values, and yet they didn't sell to the pre-existing fans. They went out and sold to other people. Is that?
No, we tried it first. We put out singles from Johnny's first couple of records. But I wouldn't say the records that I made with Johnny were they didn't emulate the sound of black radio at the time, even for the more traditional thing. Now, you know, there's the Malaco sound, which was actually flying at the time with ZZ Hill, and I think they were just about to sign Bobby Bland at the time. But I don't know, that sound, even if it was commercial, it didn't seem soulful enough for me. And I wanted to find some other ways to work with Johnny that gave him what he needed so he could sing. I mean, I'm speaking from, maybe the records were made in a commercial way, maybe the arranging and the playing and the production values are high, and yet I think underneath all of it, all I want to do is make Johnny sing.
Yeah. And what alterations in his career took place as a result of his affiliation with you?
Well, I think the alterations in his career that took place after I signed with Rounder were a career saver for him. Because as that Chitlin Circuit wound down, there are some people who still make their living doing that. Tyrone Davis, Bobby Rush, Denise LaSalle. But they've got pretty good business behind them. I can't say that Johnny ever had particularly great business. And he would sometimes resist attempts to make him a bit more attractive as an entertainment package. Johnny loved to play golf. But as a result of his Rounder records, people around the world started paying attention to Johnny as a great singer and not as an oldies artist. And I think he was frustrated sometimes that he didn't make more money than he did. But his career was indeed revived. He toured Europe with the Neville Brothers and Solomon Burke and Irma Thomas. Toured Europe every year, really. Went to Japan. And his gigs in New Orleans began attracting white fans as well as black. When we made the jazz records, he started working at Snug Harbor at the Mainstream Jazz Club in New Orleans, as well as doing the R&B gigs. Now Johnny had sung jazz back to the 60s. It wasn't something new for him, but it was not what anybody had heard him do on his R&B records, on his commercial R&B records. So his career was renewed.
What other New Orleans artists had a huge impact on you? Are you especially proud of? Please, the records.
This is not a New Orleans artist, but Solomon Burke.
Yeah.
We released a two LP set called Soul Alive, which is the biggest success we've ever had with black radio.
Is it gospel music?
No, it's R&B, but it's very gospel. He preaches or raps in the old sense of the word rap. We sold over 50,000 of that, mostly through airplay in New Orleans, Philadelphia, and Long Beach, California. Those are the three places it sold. And
did you work radio, or was promotion?
No, I wasn't working radio. No.
I mean, calling the stations, getting the record.
No. I did that for Rounder Distribution, but never for Rounder Records.
Okay.
So, and it was fun. I mean, I think we were so green at knowing how to deal with black radio. And again, I think there's that in any business, I think getting things done sometimes depends on your network of people and the bridges that you build, and we just simply didn't have those with black radio.
Right.
And who knows? Maybe it could have been even bigger than it was, but it was quite a success anyway, at selling 50,000 of that. And that record also came to me through Peter Guralnick, who knew Solomon, who'd written a chapter on Solomon in one of his books.
Yeah, I remember that intro. He says it was the first call he placed. And And Burke says, I'm doing a book on soul music. And Burke says, well, then of course you have to call the king.
Right. So yeah, Peter's been instrumental in a great many wonderful connections for me over the years.
At some point after you got started producing and were going down to Louisiana to go back to there, Rounder decided that they'd label some records as part of the Modern New Orleans Masters series. How did that work out?
Well, it was just...
Doesn't sound like
it was an attempt to come up with an overall marketing concept. That was mostly my work. I designed a logo and I wrote the ad copy and to make it more of a series.
But it was never sold as a package
or
even advertised together. It's just or even cataloged from what I could tell.
No. Well, we did put out some posters and catalogs at one point, and gradually the logo just went away.
Yeah.
But it was, we got a write-up in Time magazine at one point about the Modern New Orleans Masters series. It was probably worth doing for that, you know. But anyway, we had to follow the Solomon Burke record with another one. So I decided to take him to New Orleans, where I'd been building up pretty good musical contacts.
Right.
I knew musicians who to call, and I tried to make a commercial record
Mhm.
with Solomon. And I think he's one of the greatest voices ever to walk the earth. Certainly, I think the greatest living soul singer. But it was when I got back, I told people, I think, that I'd just taken a year off my life and trying to work with Solomon.
What is that?
We'd gotten together in Boston about a month before the sessions, just to talk about songs. He had wonderful song ideas. Solomon is a brilliant man. We were sitting in a hotel room with his brother playing guitar, and he's just reeling these ideas off his head. I still have the cassette, I think, of this hotel room rehearsal. We made our plans. I got plane tickets for Solomon, his guitar player, and his keyboard player to come to New Orleans, sent them to him. And then I didn't hear from him for a month. I got to Louisiana, no Solomon. Started calling all around the country, got his mother in Philadelphia, got his church in Los Angeles, and every now and then we get a message, Solomon's on the way, he's in Kansas City, but he's coming, don't worry. Or, the next day, no, he's in Toronto, but don't worry, he's coming. So finally on the third day, I had the musicians in the studio. It was raining, a kind of sulfurous smell in the air you get in Louisiana sometimes. Solomon pulled up in front of the studio in a cab, wearing a white suit. And Solomon's a big man, but he can be light on his feet, and he kind of danced out of the cab and put his arms around me and said, "Oh, baby, I'm so happy to see you." And I was feeling like saying, "What the fuck, Solomon? We've been waiting for you for 3 days." And he says, "Well, did you get the tracks done?" So, Solomon, man, I'm waiting to hear your songs, brother, So, we get into the studio and we made a couple of songs out of Solomon's ideas, which of course he'd forgotten and hadn't worked on for a second since the hotel room. But we managed to make a song out of one of them, and we did Sam Cooke, "A Change Is Gonna Come." And then we kind of hit a brick wall. He was trying to make this song, which I still have on tape, called "For You." I'd buy the White House and paint it pink for you, and so forth. But he eventually was trying to pull songs out of the air, but in no kind of form that anybody could relate to. So I sent the musicians home. And I'd kind of suspected that this might happen. So in the meantime, I'd contacted Dan Penn, Doc Pomus, Paul Kelly, Jimmy Lewis, Johnny Copeland, Sarah Brown, everybody who I could think of that I knew that wrote good songs. And so I pulled out my bag and said, "Solomon, I think we should listen to these songs." And, we listened to the songs, and he, "I want to do that." "No, that's Dan Penn." He knew what he was listening to a lot of the time. And so we came back to the studio the next day. We started cutting the songs that I brought to the sessions. He was incredibly gifted as an arranger. A lot of the arranging ideas for the rhythm section on those tracks came from Solomon. And after a week, we had an album's worth of tracks, or maybe even 4 or 5 days, with Solomon doing something of a live vocal with the track, with a lyric sheet in his hand. And then it came time for Solomon to do vocals. And say, "Well, Solomon, you ready to go in and work on these songs?" And from that point, he gave me more grief than I've ever gotten from anybody. And I think he was just messing with me. But if anybody had put this on tape, you could have put it out as a comedy record of me arguing with Solomon Burke over what is soul. you know, say, baby, you want soul. You know, soul comes to spontaneous. It's something you feel. It's something that just comes down and comes out through you. That's what you got on the tape. That's spontaneous. Solomon, you don't even know the songs. You know, now that you know the songs better, you can sing them. How are you going to make love to a woman if you don't know her? So this went on and on and on and on. Sometimes hours of this sparring. In the meantime, David would be playing, the engineer would be playing the tape, the demo in the background, and Solomon would gradually be learning the song. He'd say, all right, I'll go make you happy, I'll go sing the song. And he would go sing, and then
He
he'd
just
sing.
wanted you to put out the demo, essentially, as vocal? Is that what he...
Huh?
He just wanted you to put out the demo? Or did he...
Yeah,
had done anything
he was
on the demo?
he was happy to put out those scratch vocals that
Right,
he put on the
exactly.
record. Yeah.
That's...
So finally, he would go into the studio and nail the song. But he put me through this every time. I don't, and at one point he made the comment, listen, if it's a hit, then I'll learn it. But we eventually got it. It got more and more ridiculous as the session went on, where he had Raymond Miles come in and overdub a bunch of synthesizer stuff, and had his brother play guitar parts on things. And I was just kind of beaten down by this one. It's all right, put on what you want. But, no, and then in the meantime, when we started the sessions, there was a hurricane headed toward New Orleans. And when Solomon got to the studio, we were looking at the news on TV, he says, don't worry, I'm going to take care of the hurricane. And sure enough, that afternoon, the hurricane turned around and went the other way. As soon as Solomon left town, the hurricane came back with a, you know, on a beeline for New Orleans. At one point he wanted to buy the tapes back from me. We got in some pretty good arguments over this thing in vision of where the record should go. I thought he was just, he wanted to throw the whole kitchen sink on this record, and he was gradually destroying it. Anyway, we parted on not the best terms, and I came back to New Orleans 2 or 3 weeks later and erased all of the junk that he put on there, and worked with a horn arranger and the guitar player and the keyboard player, and we made the record that you hear. And when I spoke to other people that had worked with Solomon later on, you know, Jerry Wexler, and they said, well, that's Solomon, you know, that's the way he is.
Do you know what he thought of the record?
He liked it.
He did?
Yeah. And, you know, I swore I never wanted to see him again after that. But I think in the end, artistically, we ended up with something really cool. And the title track actually was a minor hit in Europe.
Familiar tune for a while.
Yeah. So, I don't know, you know, I've found over the years sometimes I think I've learned with somebody like Solomon that sometimes patience pays off. You know, just let somebody do what they're going to do and back off and see what they do. But there's that point where you've got to say, no, man, this isn't working. You know, let's try this.
You doing okay on time, or do you need to?
No, I'm fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now you also worked with the brass bands from New Orleans.
Mhm.
And, you did Mardi Gras Indians. Did you?
Ron Levy did the Indians.
Okay.
But I worked with the Dirty Dozen for 5 albums. I mixed the live album that's on Rounder, and then I did 4 for Columbia.
Okay. What's the
For
experience
Sony.
like working with them? You have any
Oh, they're a great band.
instances of that?
You know, they was. We actually tried to sign them before they made their first record for Concord, but because George Ween was coming out with his series on Concord Records, and he was more or less managing them at the time, they went with that instead of with Rounder. But that's the kind of thing that really gets me going. Is here was this brass band turning the whole tradition upside down, and they were funky. And a great bunch of guys, wonderful guys to work with. I felt the same way about Beaujacques. Somebody coming out of this tradition and just lighting a fire under the whole thing. Yeah. Ron Levy made some New Orleans records too. That was a real issue for me at the time, in that Marion marries this keyboard player, and all of a sudden,
Yeah.
she was basically trying to push me out of the way and put him in. That was my hardest time during my employment at Rounder, where I felt like there was very little respect for what I had accomplished and done.
Yeah.
And even Bill made the comment at one point to me, hey, nepotism's okay if it works.
Well, I was thinking, since he's gone now, live by the family relationship, die by the family relationship.
Right. Oh, now I think he's. Yeah, that was a tough one for me. And I've known Ron for a long time too. And anyway.
What records did you make during that period when he was sort of in his ascendance? Do you remember what were you doing though?
I kept working with my little stable of artists, with Johnny Adams, I have a discography of what I worked on. I can print that out and show you.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
What I worked on. But I kept going. I actively sought employment elsewhere at the time. I almost went to work for None Such. I talked to Seymour Stein. He wanted to, when he didn't get, well, actually, wasn't working for None Such per se, but Seymour Stein wanted to start a new label like None Such. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad I didn't do that now too, because he didn't last long with Sire after that. But I'd worked for him too. I did a Charlie Rich record for Sire through Joe McEwen during that time. Yeah, those were tough years for me. I was also Rounder's art director during that time.
Right.
That was something that I started doing, and I actually took some classes at the Art Institute of Boston and learned that pretty well. Nancy Given and I got Rounder onto computer-based graphic design long before anybody else did that.
And you and she would work across the board on all the records. So
Yeah. And we always hired freelancers too to do the design. But
and is that still one of your functions? You the art director? Of the
no,
label?
Nancy's art director.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I'm vice president of A&R now.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a funny time, boy.
What was it like working with James Booker?
It was. He was tougher than Solomon in a way, although not a. Solomon's just a brilliantly manipulative person. I have great respect for Solomon. He's. We were friends again now. I saw him. I think I saw him like 6-7 years ago at the Municipal Auditorium in New Orleans, and I went backstage and. He had a big hug and a smile. He said, "Baby, let's make another record together." And I was saying, "All right, Solomon," but in the back of my head I was saying, no way.
I remember seeing him years ago in San Francisco, and he comes out, as I guess a lot of guys do. The band's been on for a half an hour before he comes out.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And then, but I'll never forget the line. He kind of looks out at the audience after some applause. Applause number. He looks out and he waits. And it's like a silence that got uncomfortable in this club.
Wow.
The applause dies down. He's supposed to say something.
Right,
He's supposed to move into another number. He's he's sitting there. And finally he says, although maybe it was shtick, because I didn't see it. I only saw him twice, but he said, "The king does not stand for a seated audience." So everybody in the place, obligatory, stands up, and then he stands up, and they start playing again.
Wow. That is funny.
So anyway, James Booker. I'm curious about.
Yeah, I first heard him play at the Maple Leaf when my friend Tom Smith from Connecticut was in New Orleans with me, and he said, man, you know, I heard this guy playing in the window of a laundromat. You got to come hear him. And I'd known of Booker vaguely as just somebody whose name I'd seen on records.
Yeah.
And there he was in the Maple Leaf Bar playing this upright piano. And one time out of 6, when you go to hear him, it was just the most astonishing music that you could ever hope to hear coming out of one person. So I approached him, and the guy that managed the Maple Leaf was also managing Booker at the time, John Parsons, about making a record. Booker was I mean, I think he's probably the only person who I ever worked with who I think might be called a genius. But man, he had problems too.
Drank a lot, I understand.
Drugs and personality problems and alcohol and he'd done time in Angola for heroin. As far as I know, he quit heroin, but he replaced it with a bunch of other stuff, so I'm not sure it made much difference.
He's not the type of guy you could get a career going for at all, was it?
No, in fact, we had, after the album came out, it was a public television show in Chicago, like Austin City Limits, but from Chicago. I can't remember what it was called. They wanted to do Dr. John and James Booker on 2 pianos.
Uh-huh.
And it got down to a couple days before.
Did they come to Rounder with that idea, or approach? Is that how they reached out to him, through Rounder?
Yeah, it was through Rounders. Yeah, and they were contacting, they were talking to Dr. John's management too, and you know, Booker couldn't take a cab across town without having problems, and it just never happened. He wouldn't do it. So the opportunities continued to exist for him, but he was an extremely intelligent man, but sometimes just incapable of existing in the same dimension as the rest of us. But so John Parsons and I talked about putting together a band for Booker, which we did. Red Tyler, who was from the Gatemouth Sessions, who was a remarkable studio musician in the 50s and 60s in New Orleans, played on thousands and thousands of records. He was someone that he died last year, became a great friend and somebody that I learned a great deal from.